Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to day 2 of our Cybersecurity for Women conference. So we have an exciting lineup of speakers for you today. We're going to start off the day with a very interesting topic. We have with us Layla Al Zoubi. She's going to be talking about attack surface, security standards, and threat hunting with containerized applications. So Layla, you can go ahead and get your screen share set up. I'm going to tell the audience a little bit about you.
Thank you.
So a little bit about Layla. Layla is a proud mother of 2 girls and a cybersecurity enthusiast with 15 years of professional experience with international and financial enterprises in security design, operations, compliance, and incident management. Layla firmly believes security is an enabler for businesses and digital transformation, and that a secure continued service necessarily comes with a good user experience. She is currently building her expertise in cloud and application security from architecture to secure delivery with hands-on experience in DevSecOps. She is a master's degree holder in computer networks and information security from DePaul University. Layla is also a certified data protection officer and a certified forensic analyst. In addition, she is an active member in various Jordanian security communities and local conferences. With that, I'm handing the stage over to you, Layla. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for Rocheston for this opportunity and for your help and support. I can start now with the presentation. As you have mentioned, it's about containerized applications attack surface, threat hunting, and security standards. Of course, I'm speaking from Jordan, so hello from Jordan. I know that with COVID-19, traveling is a little bit of a dream now. However, hopefully one day, very soon, we'll be able to meet in a real conference and to get to know Jordan and to get to meet everyone, one of you face to face. As you have mentioned as well, my name is Layla Al Zoubi. I have 15 years of experience in information security and cybersecurity. I've worked for logistics and e-commerce firm, and I also work now in the financial sector. I love security in general. It's my passion, and I have started it just from the beginning. I like to go into vertical and horizontal experience at the same time because I like, for example, I am a GCFA certified forensic analyst. And I like technical work and hands-on, finding the adversaries, looking for attackers, etc. And at the same time, I believe in information system management systems. I'm a data protection officer. I also believe that security is the way to privacy, and privacy is the way to security as well. Also, again, just to repeat, I have been one of the organizing members of the B-Sides Amman last year, and hopefully we'll hold other community conferences as well. The session today we'll start with fundamentals about containers, then we'll talk about the attack surface, threat hunting when it comes to containers and the whole concept in general, and how we actually can drill down with this. Then we'll talk a little bit about security standards. I have a reason why I'm actually mentioning all these topics when it comes to containerization. And then if we had time, we'll go a little bit of some showing you what we were talking about during the session. So when we start talking about containers and Dockers and microservices, agility, DevSecOps, all these topics, now in 2020, the discussion is not about if any security officer can or will need to learn anything has to do with containers and Dockers. The question is now how should you go to deep dive? We need to know the basics, just like we know about networks, we know about normal databases, we know about OWASP, for example, we know about risk appetite, these general common security topics, vulnerability management, all of this stuff. We know them, we need to know them. Now we need to know about Dockers and its security. Now the question should be for any professional security officer running, whether it's on the hands-on, a forensics analyst, a SOC operation, or on the managerial level, the CISO, or any InfoSec team member who's looking at the policies and procedures or the risk of the company as a whole. How should we dive? How deep should we go? because the depth is now important, and it is just a matter of learning the language, learning the products, learning the tools, and we should be set off good to go. Also, just to brief you, within this presentation, I'll be talking about fundamental concepts. These fundamental concepts, I will be using interchangeably. I might be using containers and Dockers, I mean the same. Saying microservices or containerized applications also, I mean the same. For orchestration, I will be saying using maybe OpenShift, Kubernetes, and ECS. They're the same, or Docker Swarm also. They are the same in terms of the use case itself, the objective that they serve. They differ definitely. They're commercial products. They have different features, of course, but at the same time, we're talking about the orchestration concept. Of course, however, and this is a very common mistake in the technology, the new people who don't know Dockers and containers, that they mix it with virtualization. They're totally different, and we don't mean the same. When I say containers, I don't mean virtualization. And when I talk about anything on the cloud, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is the same control that needs to be implemented on-prem. Of course, other concepts and terms that come into mind when we're talking about containers. We talk about service mesh. Service mesh is a very important topic when it comes to containers and communication. DevSecOps is a very also trendy word at that time. We also talk about infrastructure as a code. So these are all topics: secrets management, logging when it comes to containers, etc. These are all keywords that appear and pop up in any conversation when a person talks about containers, and I will be using them, and I'll explain also later on. So technology people tend to like now more often about talking about containers, adopting microservices, deploying systems in the form of containers and microservices for very valid technical reasons. They want more proper resource utilization. They need to deploy systems, application, was it back end or front end, with the cross-platform capabilities, that they don't need to worry about compatibilities, to minimize, of course, complexity in setting up a system. We need high availability, so we need scalability. So Dockers and containers in general provide this for the team, for the developers and the system designers. It's also help in reducing the dependency collisions. It also takes Dockers and containers talk about the new languages. They're API based, API first, and it's all in the hand of everyone to actually scale and develop and provide the high-end products in a very short time, from end to end. So this is a new technology, and it's the future, and it's coming. I'm a true believer that security people should join the containers party. We shouldn't just stay at the resistance bench saying, no, containers is not secure, containers is not clear, developers don't know what they're doing. We shouldn't. There is a new attack surface. It's a challenge for security people. This is definitely true. However, we should join the containers party, and we should benefit from it as well. For security practices, it's a new technology. We can easily enforce and ensure that compliance, security requirements, basic issues like TLS 1.0, it shouldn't be there in Dockers. It's not, because there's no legacy systems. Proper segregation of duties, privilege escalations issues, hardening, all of this stuff, we should be part of this discussion, and we should also be enforcing it. This wouldn't happen if we're not joining the party, and we should. It's really fun, actually, and talking about parties. Now here we'll talk about the basic fundamentals. So what happened when containers or Dockers came into the picture? There is a publication from NIST. It's Containerized Application Security Guidelines. It describes containers as a standardized way of grouping disparate contents together while isolating them from each other. This is actually the key point, where we are grouping, we're isolating one content, one function, in its environment. We're not only isolating the function itself. We're not isolating, for example, file upload. We are isolating file upload with all its requirements from libraries, bins, anything that needs to come with it from any other function. So it can run on its own, isolated anywhere, and then it can anyone can communicate with it, and it can actually communicate with others. What happened actually in the past with its virtualization is never going to go. This is a very important point to actually mention as well. Virtualization is here to stay. However, when the admins, infrastructure admins, set up their virtualization environment or virtual manager, they allocate the host OSs. And with allocation of host OS, the VM1, VM2, VM3, was it for a database, was it for a backend or a front end? They also allocate with it bins, libraries, memories, disk space, processing CPUs, capabilities, disk storage as well. Also, they need to assign it the networking interfaces, the IPs, all of that. And it remains dedicated, and it will be consumed by whatever applications are running on this, and it will be only allocated for this segment that has been cut off from the virtual setup. However, when we're coming to containers, the host OS, for example, running on this physical server, will be having applications running on it. However, in containers, they will share the kernel, they will share the memory, they will share the processing, the resources, the networking interfaces, everything, and they will be able to communicate within each other as a network also on their own, and they will be able to scale. So if we have one application, for example, we can have, for example, for holidays, like for holidays and shipping companies, and so they need to scale, because when it comes in holiday season, they need to scale up their backend to serve all this kind of new holidays, gifts exchange, services exchange, etc., or any buzz season. But they don't need to scale this memory storage, etc., for the rest of the year. So containers would allow them to do that using the same allocated resources, not buying more resources, adding up to the STAN, or working on it. Also, the last option, which is also getting hype, is actually doing the containerization over virtualization. So you need to have the bare metal. Containers don't run directly on bare metal. This is one of the important points to realize. We need a virtual setup. It's very important to manage the host OS. Also for scaling up, there are benefits for that. And then we fire up the host OSs, and then we run the containerization, and then they will be run, depends on the concepts we are running, how we want to design our systems. We want to isolate them for other issues that we kind of discuss. So basically, this is how Nest describe the difference between virtualization and containers. It's very important, again, to realize that virtualization are not going, and actually they are merging. Now, leading virtual environments, VMware, for example, are actually getting into the business. They're even providing their own now new products for containerization, for security issues related to it, for networking, for management, for deployment. So it's everyone job now. Another point that is very important to realize here is that we were talking here about running Dockers directly with the host OS. And then we need to do a lot of manual work related to auto-scaling. So what's going on here when we're talking about containers? We need them to scale. We need them to automatically restart if there is an issue or a compliance point. This is all doable manually. However, it's a heads-on. It's trouble for the administration, etc. From a development point of view, especially, and this is a very important point to mention as well, are that virtualization are handled by mainly the infrastructure team. The infrastructure team are benefiting much more from virtualization in terms of resource management, scalability. They are burdened of the physical issues and concern. They're more about the fact there is no one having a server and just moving from department to apartment. So allocation, resource management is much better, and this is a benefit for the infra team. However, with containers, the main beneficiary are actually developers and applications team. So they have less less time for resources management, for scaling up, for automation. That's why where here came orchestration. The orchestration level is when we're talking about, just to make it familiar, when we talk about orchestration, we're talking about Kubernetes, whether was it on-prem, Anthos, or GKE, or we are talking about Docker Swarm, OpenShift, ECS. They're all orchestrators. Orchestrator job is to actually automate, to scale. It's a deployment manager. So we actually deal with, as an administrators or infrastructure team, they deal with the orchestration. And then the developers would deploy the images and the Docker file that they have. They build it up and they run it, and then it's deployed as a containers. So we have another factor here. We used to have here, we're talking here about 4 factors. We're talking about the physical server. We're talking about the virtualization manager, and then we're talking about the host OS, and then we come to containers. Now we also have, and it's picking up. They're leading the Kubernetes, Google, they have transferred their project from an internal project they have. Now it's an open source project, and it has its own community, and it's evolving. It's actually the core of everything. Even other cloud providers, vendors, competitors, they are picking up. So even Amazon, they have a Kubernetes engine and they support it, same as for Microsoft. This is the language, to be honest, for running containers, especially when talking about enterprises. Of course, when we're talking about orchestration and we're talking about Kubernetes, there is a little differences. It's worth mentioning here because as a language, it's important to say. As I said, when I say container or Docker, I mean the same thing. But when we say pod, we are now talking about multiple containers in one pod. This is how Kubernetes itself deploy the images. It's deployed as an image. It might contain 1 or 2 or more containers. So at this point, we realize how many components we have. And as a security professional, this is the attack surface. We'll talk about it from an attack surface perspective in a bit. However, on the top of my mind, when I started to work on this containers work 2 years ago, the key point that I wanted to do, the controls items that I wanted to do, is actually to harden all the components. Then I wanted to encrypt TLS, to encrypt everything. I need SSL everywhere. I need certificates. I need publishing. I need communication encryption. I need for something that resides or is on the host. Also, I wanted to run container security tool, just like I run antivirus, just like any anti-spam, HEPS, IDS on the agents, because at the end of the day, this is for me, was it a server, a workstation? I need to have this common controls. And this is available in containers, and we'll come how to do with that very shortly. We also want to work here. We want to secure the workload. So this is the new terminology for mentioning. We're not talking about servers anymore. We're talking about workload. Workload is a very common term that is used on the cloud. The VM is a workload on the cloud, and container is a workload on-prem or on cloud. This is the same. For this pod needs to have its own security policies. There is network security policies that need to be as well. This container, because it shares the kernel for the host OS level, it shares the kernel and all the resources, the disk, the file system, the memory, etc. It needs to have its own security for how it runs. Is it running as a privilege? Will it penetrate all the layers that it's running within to actually execute on the host? Then the whole concept of containerization is not really valid, because we're not isolating. Actually, this is exfiltrating. This container, for example, it will exfiltrate all the layers that we are doing for protection and management, and it will be as if we're running from the host. And this is a very, very, very alluring target for attackers. This is what they are looking for, to be honest. So these are ideas of controls that we need. Basically, this is the top of my mind. I saw this image, and then I need to secure every component of this point, which is a very valid approach. And this is how the technology is heading to. Also, from the fundamentals and the orchestration, I would like to mention that the container that we talk about, it has a life cycle. It starts from a Docker file. Docker file is a YAML language-based file. It has the steps of how the image will be built up and how the container will actually have the capabilities to run. It says, for example, that you're building the Docker from an Debian image or an Alpine image. Of course, usually you always hear about the Linux kind of images. There is some portability for Windows, but it is much more immature. Then this Docker file transfers into an image once you do actually pull the Docker file and build it. And once you deploy it on a running environment, it becomes a container. So this life cycle is one of the Docker's itself work. But then there is another life cycle for the image, which is as a container which comes. It's built now. It's not an image anymore. It's not a text. It's an actual functioning component and workload. Containers are ephemeral. I didn't mention this before. We're talking about scalability and maintainability of running, for example, a whole website, a delivery website with its all back-end components running into, for example, different microservices. One microservices for the landing page, one microservice for orders request, one microservices for merchants access, one microservices for request, one microservice for tracking, one microservice for SMS, etc. All these containers are isolated and running on their own, and they need to scale based on the automation and the need that the orchestration is providing, or the application design in general. But these containers, this one specific container that is initiated from the Docker file, is ephemeral. Ephemeral means that it can actually consume all resources and restart. It might be not used. It becomes in an exit mode. It runs in an isolated environment, and you need to allow it to communicate with other systems. So these points are actually, so that the container, once you run it and actually say, yes, please run, it might stop. It might stop because there is a problem in the Docker daemon, the environment that's running it, or because there is an error, malfunction within the Docker itself. So it will stop and it will restart automatically. This is the whole point of maintainability and scalability as well. Scalability, of course, that the orchestration will come and say, I want from this microservices 10 microservices, or I want to scale it on not just 2 nodes. I want it to run on 3 or 4 host OSs at the same time. So this life cycle from pull, build, stop to remove, actually to delete this exit or dormant containers, we need orchestration. And also we needed to handle the volumes, to handle the folder etcd where it has all the secrets and all very important crucial information. This is all comes with orchestration. Also, another fundamental concept that comes with containers is the service mesh. Red Hat, and I like this description, by the way, it's a way to control how different parts of an application, a different part of an application share data with one another. In our case, that this different part of an application is the container, is the microservice. This is the SMS container, SMS management. This is the food order. This is the food cancel order container. This is the tracking microservice. They need to communicate with each other because this might be a web UI, this might be a backend, this might host the database itself. So all these containers are actually communicating with each other, and actually they don't leave the initial host, which is a very important point. Initially, when you used to have backend and front end, this has to go through a firewall, a switch router. The traffic would route from one environment to another. We would have DMZs, for example. So, and we will have the front end on a DMZ with a web reverse proxy. Now we might actually have it all on one cluster, one server, one physical location. So this communication might not be allowed because this is, at the end of the day, we need to maintain the 2-tier or 3-tier application design. And we need to disallow that. We might allow it from a network perspective, but we need it to authorize for any critical, for example, payment container. So this is what comes here. So there is what's called south-north communication and east-west communication between. It refers to Communication within the containers themselves, within the cluster, we're not exiting the parameter that we are working on. Or when we're going to outside with publishing, maybe talking with components that are not running on the cluster, etc. What is very important here to know, and that's why I said security should join the party, is that here we can, the service mesh, because it's injected as part of every container, part of the tool that's called Istio, for example, it's very common, and it's sidecar proxy. It's injected in every pod, and it's like you have on each communication channel or link or interface a security tool. It's not a security, Istio is not a security tool. However, this is how we can look at it, that we can enforce TLS, encryption, to encrypt all communication within the cluster, and we can also enforce role-based authorization. The role-based authorization can also provide us this luxury of MTLS. It's a layer 7 configuration or a deployment, and it can provide us this very, I like it, MTLS. Applications, this is a very common security requirement on all advanced systems, that components need to mutually authenticate before the action is actually executed. Aruba can allow it. It's complicated. DevOps don't like it. However, it is very useful for the security team. So now what we were talking about so far is the container itself. But now we're gonna talk the cluster and how it's running as a run environment. As I said in the beginning, this comes with great concepts and terminologies like Agile and DevSecOps. They want to run and scale on the production, and they want to deliver fast. They want a very speed delivery, that developers and application owners. And hence they like the Docker and containers. The DevSecOps comes as well as an approach to deliver fast, the DevOps, sorry. And then we come also here to join the party and say we are DevSecOps and we want to control all these delivery channels to deploy and run the images. As I said, this whole containers part is what we were talking about all over from the beginning of the presentation. Only covers the point related to the build and run. Here is an application that has been created or stored on Docker Hub or pulled from Docker Hub, downloaded on a registry, and then deployed on the cluster, and then we might destroy it. This is the life cycle of a container. It's a container image life cycle. And we as a security not only need to worry when it comes to microservices and application security in general, containerized application, it's a fact that we realize that we need to secure it at runtime, and we need to secure all the pipeline that delivers it from the code that developers start working on, to the deployment, to the build, to all the modes that it might run on. And this is a very important factor that we need to work on, and it's picking up as well. Anyway, I'm not talking about anything that is being old and new. It's not breaking news. It's actually very much understandable now in all markets and between all vendors. So what are controls that we can provide here? We need to use base images. Also, we need to enforce DevSecOps, to harden registries, to enforce admission control. We need to prevent rather than detect, and the nature of the orchestration, the Dockers, the clusters, all of that allow us to do that, allow us to admission. We can prevent, and we can't prevent, for example, it's more of like the knack of the clusters, if I might say. But however, on the container level, I can run a container security tool. It's a container itself as well, and it will allow, for example, only containers that using specific, not a general purpose image. Only will allow containers that are not running as root, that have good CIS benchmark hardening scores, that doesn't have vulnerabilities, that coming only from the source that we trust, from our own on-prem registry, not from Docker Hub, for example. I'll show you Docker Hub can have very risky images. So this is all something that we can benefit on, and we can enforce from the beginning. If we wait for example, the environment or the enterprise that we're working on, and already starting with this DevOps and containers, and then we come 1 year later and say, oh, there are security controls that we need to implement, etc., we'll be a little bit late, which is really sad story because we can be the first. Also, as we mentioned that we're using the cluster, and we talked about the orchestration, we talked about the life cycle. It's also worth mentioning that when we talk about containerized applications, we don't only talk about microservices for deploying the logic of the application itself. I'm not only talking about the back-end logic of a lookup service or SMS service. No, we're talking about, for example, container running MongoDB. The database is running as a container, or maybe the queue system, the Kafka, the streaming tool that we're using between the applications communication. It's also running as a container. Also, we might have a tool called Kayali. This is like management for the ST communication. It's an interface. It's a supporting utility. It's also running as a container. So we might have on the same cluster that is providing business application services and systems. We might have as well databases, network products, and even security products. So when we talk about protecting this cluster and its application, it's a little bit messy. So we need, for example, for the ones that we know, we need to do code scanning. We need to ensure proper publishing security. We need to pull this image for Mongo from a trusted source, not from any source. Because developer, it's very easy for them to pull it. You have the connection to the internet and everything is fine. You just pull, oh, I need a Mongo container. Just pull Mongo container under it. You don't know if it's secure, if it's not, if it's hardened, if it's scanned, if it's clean, if it's not malicious. We don't know that, and we need to control that. That's why we said that we need to control the whole process, not just the runtime. So we talked about the fundamentals. I hope that the fundamentals are clear. For someone who doesn't know containers, it might be a little bit overwhelming. However, it's all about that. It's few concepts. Of course, there is architectural design for the Dockers, for the orchestrators, etc. But it revolves around the same concepts. So with a few practices, a few readings, continuous learning, it can be easily attainable for any security officer. So the first reason we said that we need to know about containers is actually to join the security party, the containers party. Another reason, and it's a very important reason, is that we need to win the battle against attackers, and attackers will first utilize, and it's a very alluring target for them, the Dockers, because they know it's not secure enough, it's not well protected, it's not maintained, there's no standards, etc. So it's a very easy target for them. This is number one. And number two, they will scale, they will use container to launch their attack. So we need to know them, we need how they act, we need to understand that they have a new weapon, and we need to know how to react to it. So as mentioned already, we're talking about a very layered attack surface. This attack surface traverses from the host OS, the virtualization, the orchestrator, the Docker engine, the applications that are running. There is an attack surface related to network-related issues for the communication, attack surface coming from the registries that we are pulling the images from, attack surface that is related to how the Docker itself is layered as well. So this is very critical job for security, and it's interesting. So we need to look at that. I want to mention a little bit of the risk associated. So if we're running just to map the attack surface to our mind into measurable concepts, how we can actually tackle each one of them. The first, let's start from the below, from the bottom. From the bottom, we're talking about host OS. We're running containers. We are supposed to run isolated environments of containers, isolated by bins, libraries, etc. They run on their own. There is no kind of compromise. This is a very neat, clean container running, or a pod. However, a compromised host would lead to actually full control on the microservice that it's run on. So we need not to have an outdated OS. We need to have security agents. We need to have antivirus, anti-malware, HEPS, maybe FEM. We need to have these components on the host OS, and we need to worry about compatibility issues, because not all vendors support for the host OS running containers, any security agents, they need to run, for example, as a Docker engine, or they need to run as a container. So we need to harden this Ubuntu OS. We need to install the security agents, and we need to have it updated, hardened, configured well to remove unnecessary libraries and components. This is all needs to be done, just like any other server. The cluster design. Remember when I was just saying that clusters should run on isolated environments. We should have, for example, cluster for systems running containers with passwords, with authentication data, with financial data, payment, for example. This is all needs to be isolated. And then we need to also redesign and isolate within the container itself. We shouldn't have one namespace that a namespace is one unit of grouping the containers. They can't communicate by each other with each other if they are in the same namespace. We should isolate. The backend shouldn't talk to the front end except through proper channels, and we need also to protect the design of the cluster as a whole. The orchestration risk, it's a little bit detailed, so I will skip it. It's all about there is a control plane, master plane, and control plane, data plane, and control plane. There are risks related to this engine, to the brain that runs the containers, and any compromise on that level, it actually means another compromise on the containers themselves. Now, when we're talking about the containers, we're worried about from the very bottom, the code of the application that's running, the type of the image that is running, the OS that is built on, any component that is running on it, how it's running, if it's running in privilege mode, if it's running with root user. All these details are actually risky stuff that we need to skip. Of course, we need to enforce that only authorized communication from service communication, it also needs to be done. So we have another level. Then we have the network service mesh risks. The network service mesh, which is the network risks, because any network related, what was it, traffic sniffing, man in the middle, container reading, all the communications that's happening, unauthorized access is allowed for a malicious container that shouldn't actually, it was deployed by mistake or by intention by a malicious attacker. Then it comes in the man in the middle and it communicates, and it can actually manipulate the role of the cluster at the container. This is all risky, and this is an attack that we need to handle strictly. There is also, of course, within the containers and orchestrations, very important topic, which is secret management. The nature of how the containers run, we have secrets, configured keys, encryption keys, database, maybe the MongoDB, we're encrypting something in the database, and we store the key just next to us within this cluster in a very critical folder and etcd dump, etc. This is all needs to be protected as well, and it's a very critical and a little bit topic that is not picking up. It's very important, and I believe next year it will be very important. It will be the focus actually in secrets management. It's still in its beginnings. Registry risks, we need to have an approved registry. We need to allow deployments of containers for application X only from the approved, scanned, monitored, and regularly updated registry with images. We shouldn't allow someone to just pull any image from anywhere. Then we need to have proper audit logs and monitoring on the cluster from all the level of logs. We'll come about this topic in specific in the threat hunting. So as you can see, the attack surface is very, very clear. It's complicated, however, it's clear. I want to say just very important point here is that from, let's say, the cyber kill chain for any command and control APT, maybe the delivery and the delivery mechanism is the same. The risk to just read, to put the foothold, the first landing point for any attacker in any application, was it monolithic or microservice-based applications, a containerized application, it's so far it is the same. It's not easier to exploit. However, there are 2 points. The first point is that people who are actually developing applications, containerized, are not following standards and best practices, which make it an unhardened system, which is very easy to exploit and to actually deliver the attack to. This is number one. The number 2 point, which is very important, is that bad configurations and bad design, insecure setup will make it very easy to exploit. The threat from exploiting the interface to capturing the OS that is running on this application is running on in Dockers, if it's not hardened, if it's not well protected, is very easy. So the exploitation and the installation, etc., there are no proper hardening and security monitoring and control and preventive measures that has a cascading effect. Mostly because privilege escalation is very high, and we need to protect against. It's very important. Technically, we say that containers share the same host. They live in the namespace. They live in namespaces. We need to isolate them, and we need for anyone to not be able to escape the communication from one namespace to another namespace, or from the namespace itself to the host. So this is a general discussion, this general layout for the attack surface. Quickly, I think I'm running out of time, right? Threat hunting. So just to talk about, we talked about the fundamentals of containers and how we need to secure them in general concepts. And we looked at the attack surface related to the containerized applications. And then we want to say that threat hunting is really a real thing. I believe I come from the SANS school that says that threat hunting has 3 objectives. Threat hunting is a preventive control. Threat hunting program needs to act to actually reduce the exposure of external threats. It aims to improve the speed and accuracy of the threat to response. This is a very important point. And of course, eventually leads to the reduction of the number of breaches. So I look at it as a preventive control, and for it also it needs to have very proper understanding of the system, and to know the correct artifacts that we need to collect before the attack, not after the attack. Speaking of attacks, there are attacks, very pods, known Linux pods. This is a Trend Micro report that talks about two malware pods that has been detected as targeting Dockers. Each one of them, the KG and XOR DDoS, have different approaches. However, they are targeting Docker-based environments. So the threat is there, and the threat hunting objective needs to actually protect from all these risks and attacks to reduce the breach and to actually be able to respond correctly, timely to the attack, not to only contain it, but to just eliminate it and to act correctly against it. We should benefit from why threat hunting and containers can live together happily, because we can actually create this reference model. We can also work on the right setup to provide things correctly and to ensure that we have what is good and what is evil. Using the admission control and to alert on violation. Sorry, but I need to ask because I think I'm running out of time. I'm not sure if I'm connected or someone can hear me. So another very important point, I'm not sure if it's not yet well thought of, is that adversaries, when we look at threat hunting and deep intelligence schools, we always look at forms of resistance. And Dockers themselves are ephemeral and volatile. So the adversary, this attacker who wants to run and to live on our cluster, he needs to persist as well. So he needs to leave traces and marks in the file system, in volumes, because this is how actually Dockers do persist. So it will persist as well. So monitoring the persistent facts or artifact is a very important point for threat hunters when it comes to Dockers. We need to look at volumes. We need to look at keys. We need to look at users created that needs to persist. We need to look at the control plane, not the data plane, because this is where they will actually live and exist. So this is types of logs that we need to collect to actually, we need to get the container service logs from the Docker, the container itself, the Kubernetes. We need to get the host OS, because if an attacker or adversary needs to persist, he needs to persist on the host level. This is where he has all the resources. This is where he has everything, actually. And he can move on to launch its attacks or harvest any data, leak, do any kind of the data breaches. So we need to collect the logs. We need to persist the logs outside the cluster, because it is ephemeral and they are volatile. And we need to monitor, log, and alert on any discrepancies. So we look at protection for application containerization, proper hardening, if I may say it in items, then proper control and alert and admission controls, then proper alert and monitoring for the cluster while it's running. Before we see a few things in action, because we're running out of time, I will need to mention the topic that is related to container security and standards. So standards are picking up. There is no yet this, other than the NIST application container security guideline, a few benchmarks for Docker, for Kubernetes, and for GKE, they have another the CS benchmark. There is the OWASP container security verification standard, also in its very early draft. I think it's the second or third publication. Or version. Security standards are picking up. However, they're not. Yes?
Huh?
Okay. What? Yeah, I thought you were talking to me. No problem. So this is, the requirements will remain the same. But yes, the question...
Tell her to become host.
Requirements will remain the same, but question of how and when to implement that need is the challenge. What I'm trying to say here, was it cluster, containerized applications, or different attack surface, it's a complicated setup, etc. However, at the end of the day, we always need to have the same requirements and to implement the best practices that we all know and we are used to know. So it's a new technology. However, the security controls are, they will adapt to this new technology, but they are within the same area. We need to make sure that we fix all vulnerabilities, that we do proper hardening, that we prevent privilege, that we manage privilege escalations, that we enforce encryption, that we handle secrets, that we do proper segregation in the environments, that we enforce authentication and authorization on all the levels, that we do proper monitoring and logging. However, the only challenge that we're going to face, not only that the standards are not technical or detailed enough to actually make it easier for anyone who's new in this area, they need to do everything on their own. This is number one challenge. The second point is that the tools may not be as ready as for the monolithic applications and the normal service. For example, the vulnerability management tools that we know, Nessus, Rapid7, anything else, Tenabit, Qualys, they all have their own dedicated modules for containers and Docker scanning. So what the tool you have now is not enough, but you need to get a subscription and additional module, etc. Of course, there are challenges as well when it comes to security containers and standardizing the containers. This stage that we wake up in the morning and, we have containers in the environment, we need to have standards. We need to define our own policy for protection. We'll face challenges. The vendors that we're dealing with might not be ready, and the maturity of their products might be a little bit in its early stages. The InfoSec team that we deal with might not have the same alignment that we look at as a technical security people, and the risk appetite that they have is different than what is, there's no alignment between the InfoSec and business and compliance. Even the IT team themselves, it's still adopting, they're early adopters, and they don't know enough to protect, and they might just use things generally and as is, and it would be very risky for us. So there is no one wavelength for all the parties involved in, for example, the usual stuff that we do for all systems. Now we have a new interface, a new attack surface, and we have different adoptions and readiness level and awareness. So this is another challenge when it comes to security standards. So standards producers are not ready, and people are not ready as well. However, attackers are ready, so it's a little bit risky. Here, I would like also to say that, as I said, requirements are the same. Attack surface is clear for us. We need to learn more about it. We need to do the basics. If we start off with these little issues, or little configurations, it will be a very proper setup for any beginner. So this is the manifesto. We need to use a minimal host OS. We need to always update. We need to harden.
Layla, we need to wrap up.
Sorry?
We need to wrap up.
Yes, okay, I'm done actually. This are the points that you can look at. And we need to use Dockers for security, also for the security products to scale up, etc. Basically, that's it. We're not going to do any hands-on, unfortunately. However, you can reach for me anytime to show you the pathway to that. I know that it's a very interesting topic for a lot of people. And I know that many people would like to actually see the hands-on, to look at Dockers. And if you need any help, you can reach me on my email or LinkedIn anytime. And thank you. I hope the topic was not very overwhelming or very general for those who know Dockers. Thank you.
No, I think what you managed to do is you managed to take, I know Dockers, it's a pretty complicated subject. You made it pretty easy to understand. Now we have a couple of questions from our audience. Is there a limit on the host OSs for running the containers?
Is there a limit for?
Is there a limit on the number of host OSs for running the containers?
So this depends on the provider itself. For example, GKE, the Google Kubernetes, they, for example, run their cluster on 25 hosts. And then they scaled up last year, end of year, to 50. So it depends on where you're running. Of course, there is limitations. However, it differs. So this is, for example, the GKE. Docker, I'm not sure. I think it's the same. It's a little bit slower in terms of scalability anyway, the Docker Swarm. So, but for Kubernetes, this is what I know in specific. They were 25 hosts up the cluster, and they increased it to 50 last year, end of last year.
Okay. The next one is the orchestration layer mandatory for scaling up containers?
It is mandatory for auto-scaling.
Okay.
For manual scaling, no, it's not.
Okay. If isolated containers are good for scalability, does it help in bettering security?
Yes, depends on the configuration and the hardening that we want to work on, because if we look at it correctly, it will definitely help. We will prevent the scaling of unauthorized systems and applications, etc. So we will restrict the adversaries and attackers' capabilities. They can't scale if we control the scale or the scaling mechanism. Then this definitely it's a control. It's a prevention against any evil adoption of the skill of the attacker intentions.
Okay. Next is, what is Docker Swarm and which network driver should be used with it?
Docker Swarm is an orchestration. It comes with Docker to do the orchestration. And the second point is network.
Which network driver should be used with it?
I don't understand the question, to be honest, because the Docker Swarm is the orchestration. So, for example, we have on the host 4 interfaces, the drivers that are running. One of the establishment of the Docker itself, when you actually deploy the orchestrator, you define all of this. You define the subnets, you define the ranges, you define the interfaces for everything. You say this is the management plane, how it will work. This is the control plane, how it will work. And this is where comes security. And this is where we say these are subnets that they shouldn't communicate. And then also for the drivers and the interfaces, you define this part of the provisioning of the tool. Orchestration needs to run as well, needs to be installed. It doesn't come just as is.
Okay. So now you were talking about how Dockers, you can have multiple Dockers running on one base OS, right?
Yeah, one host OS, yes.
One host OS. So what if you have one compromised Docker? Will that enable an attacker or a hacker to be able to gain control over the entire system?
Yes, this is what I actually was trying to say. So if this container is running in with user root, for example, if it's running with user root, it has direct access to the OS. If it's running in privileged mode as well, it has direct access to file systems, to secrets, to the host OS. This is why I mentioned that it has a cascading effect. That's why also we need to prevent any container running with a privileged mode or running with root user. This should not be allowed from the beginning, because any compromise to that means they are capturing, the whole cluster is compromised.
Okay. Thank you so much, Layla. I think we're done with the question. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.